On Saturday, the Schomburg Center Literary Festival returns. It's going to be an exciting day-long celebration of Black writers and culture. Promises to bring together just a real nice mix of people, real good place for book lovers to find their favorite authors. And for the first time since the pandemic began, 2019, the event will be held in person as an outdoor festival in Harlem. The library is at Malcolm X Boulevard and 135th Street, West 135th Street. So there will be storytelling workshops, vendors, exhibitors, even a visit from the New York Public Library's Bookmobile. The festival is being called a community-wide celebration of Black joy and literacy. And also it expands on the center's 97-year tradition of championing authors of African descent. Joining me now is Novella Ford, the Associate Director of Exhibitions and Programming at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, which we know is part of the New York Public Library system. Novella, nice to see you. Thank you for taking the time to be with us right now.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about Juneteenth, the timing. You always had it on this particular weekend, yes, the festival?
The first year we held it a week before, and then a week later, I should say. And then 2 years we've been in the pandemic, so it's been virtual. But it has been on Juneteenth since last year.
And since especially the federal government calling it a paid holiday and states doing the same, it'll be observed on Monday. The timing is so important, isn't it?
It is. It's very important. And, you know, when we think about emancipation, when we think about freedom in this country, one of the things that I don't want to get lost is the importance of reading and how enslaved people at one time, it was dangerous for them to learn how to read, for them to access information. So this idea of reading as a rebellious act, right? Like when we're thinking about banning of books right now in this country, but also it being a joyful act, right? And so that freedom to read whatever it is that you want to get into is most important and what we want to celebrate this year.
And Juneteenth, June 19th, goes back to the day in 1865 when enslaved people in Texas got the word about the Emancipation Proclamation, their freedom. 2 years later, then that happened with the Emancipation Proclamation. So it's so important to remember what's happening there. Let's talk about some of the books that you will have in this festival. And our first book is called We Refuse to Forget, a true story of Black Creeks, American Identity and Power. This is nonfiction history by Caleb Gale. Tell me about this novella.
Sure. So Caleb Gale, he's an award-winning journalist. And personally, any stories that weaves together those histories of Native Americans and Black Americans in this country, I think is so important to understanding the freedom, the struggle for freedom that people are continuing to have these days. So anytime that we get a chance to learn about these histories together is an important way of us expanding the story of this America.
Roger Reeves, a book of poetry, Best Barbarian. Tell us about that.
Yeah, you know, for me, poetry is the language of life and possibility. So when someone like Roger comes along, his poetry is not only beautiful, but it's weaving what's happening in the world today, but also making you run to your Google or to the library to learn about the references inside of it. And, you know, I came to Roger Reeves through this gorgeous poem called Grendel. And the first line is like, all lions must lean into something other than a roar. I mean, what else is going to come after that, right?
Yes. I like that. I want to know what's next, what comes after that. Moon and Mars, Kia Corthron.
Yeah, another powerhouse writer who finds the right balance between history and fiction. She's a playwright who understands character, but also allows space for the reader's imagination. So in this book, she is tracking this period of time in the 1800s in New York City, where this particular child is the product of Irish parent and a Black parent, and it's right before Seneca Village is raised to make way for Central Park. It is at the time of these riots that are happening in what we know as Midtown in New York City. And so it's just a really beautiful story, a hard story, but one that is filled with history, but also just if you could imagine a narrative of a particular time in New York City, this book
Yes.
does that.
Makes me think of the Broadway show Paradise Square, because they touch on those topics. Next one, You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. This is by Akwaeke Amizi. What are they trying to say in this book? Just the cover jumps out at me here with this red.
It really does. And this is one of those books where the cover and the inside actually match. It is your next best beach read, and I mean that in the best way, right? It's this delicious, messy, but honest book with these relationships that are filled with care, filled with love, filled with choosing love, even if it's at the inconvenience of the people around you. And I just think that Akwaeke has done such a beautiful job in this book, and I say pick it up immediately.
Immediately. Jacqueline Woodson, The World Belonged to Us.
Jacqueline Woodson could write anything. She's known as a children's book writer, but she writes for adults and for young adults. And this latest book, The World Belonged to Us, is just a love note to summertime, right? And being able to run the streets and be cared for by a community for the summer, and what that kind of freedom means, right? And maybe for some young people that doesn't exist anymore, but for others, it's certainly a time of joy.
So such optimism just on the cover. Miss Chloe, A Memoir of Literary Friendship with Toni Morrison by A.J. Verdell.
Well, I had to include this book because, one, it is a standout as it honors and draws the reader closer to one of our greatest American storytellers, Toni Morrison. And just to think about how Toni Morrison may have been a mentor directly or indirectly to so many literary figures that we know today. So to have this documented in this way, I think is a special read.
I like the variety and the age variety there too, and a whole lot more will be going on Saturday at this wonderful tradition, which is back, the Schomburg Center Literary Festival, Malcolm X Boulevard and 135th Street. And you'll be all set up with 10 streets will be blocked off, so a real nice festival. And it is free and open to the public. Novella Ford, thank you so much for your work, Associate Director of Exhibitions and Public Programming at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. Thank you. Best of luck with the festival.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If you'd like more information about the festival, go to our website, cbsnewyork.com.